Hey everyone, I'm Melissa Burpo, and I'm a product manager at Elastic. I work with the Security Solutions Group, and I'm a member of the team who developed and launched osquery Manager for Elastic Agent in May 2021. Today, I'm going to talk about how to monitor your endpoints using osquery and Elastic. So I'm going to cover a few different topics today. First, I want to give an overview of what osquery is and how people use it, what production deployments have historically looked like for osquery, and then what they look like today with Elastic. And then talk about Elastic Agent and the new osquery Manager integration, which brings osquery to the Elastic stack. And then finally, I'll give a quick demo that shows how it works. So just to start, osquery is an open source tool that Facebook released in 2014 to help people monitor their IT infrastructure. Think about a really large workforce where you might have a whole variety of operating systems. How do you monitor all of those systems in a standard way? And how do you do it with something lightweight that doesn't bog the system down? osquery helps with that. So it lets you query operating systems like a database. You can use basic SQL commands to ask questions about devices like servers, Docker containers, or PCs running Linux, Mac OS, or Windows. Just to give a simple example, let's say you have a compliance policy about which OS versions are allowed across your org. With osquery, you can ask that question with a standard query that works across all platforms. Just select all from OS version. And from that, you can get the major and minor release version, the patch versions, the OS architecture, and a bunch of other stuff. So OS version is just one table. In the latest release, you can query 275 tables. And you can write queries to ask all kinds of questions like, who's currently logged into the system? Are there any processes running without a binary on disk? Are there any indicators of compromise on the system? osquery makes it easy to monitor stuff like that across platforms. It's a pretty powerful tool, and it gives you greater visibility into your infrastructure and operating systems. So for those of you who haven't seen the open source version of osquery before, I just want to give you a quick overview of some of the tools that are available. First, there's osquery. It's a standalone shell where you can run interactive queries on an operating system. Once you install it, you can run the shell to query and explore the host. If you know what you need to type, you can write queries like the examples I'm showing here. So the first one shows some OS info about the host, like I mentioned before, right? So the current version and platform. And the other one shows all of the currently installed Chrome extensions. So after you enter the query and hit enter, you get the results back in the table. It helps you to develop queries and explore individual hosts. So next, there's osqueryd, which is a host monitoring daemon that helps you to monitor multiple hosts across an organization and schedule queries for those hosts. It's responsible for aggregating query results and generating logs so that you can track operating system changes over time. Schedules are defined using configurations like this super simple example that tells you what query to run. In this case, it's looking for the name and version of all of the Python packages that are installed. And it tells you how often to run it. This one runs every 3,600 seconds, which if I'm doing my math right, I'm pretty sure is about an hour. But gosh, how embarrassing that would be if that's wrong. But I think that's what it is. So these tools are great, but usually you can't just use those if you want a production deployment that's responsible for monitoring an enterprise-wide IT infrastructure that may include hundreds or thousands of endpoints. Historically, there have been 5 core areas that you need to build out to support something like that. There are a ton of tools and plugins out there that can help with all of this, both commercial and open source. But usually, almost every large-scale solution is required stitching some things together to get everything to work. So first, you need to configure all of your endpoints. That includes both initial setup to deploy and configure osquery across the environment, as well as maintenance over time, for example, to update osquery when a new version is available. That can be automated with tools like Ansible or Chef. Number 2, you need a way to manage what queries are being run on those endpoints, whether it's running live queries or scheduling queries. There are a bunch of tools to help with this one too, like Upticks or FleetDM. And then number 3, you'll need a way to collect data from the queries that you're running, basically to get the logs from your various endpoints to some destination. Popular tools for that include Logstash, which of course is an Elastic tool, but there's also FluentD and others. And we have number 4. So once you collect all that data, you need to store it somewhere. For example, with something like Elasticsearch or Postgres. And then lastly, you need a way to monitor the data you've collected, which of course is the whole point of doing all of this. You need all of this rich query data in an environment where you can detect and respond to any issues that you find. Because the value of using osquery is what you do with the data that you collect. Kibana is actually another really popular choice for this, but there are several other options. So depending on the size of your environment, setting all of this up can be pretty cumbersome, and it can require a significant investment from your DevOps team, because those are a lot of things that you have to implement and stitch together. And that's one of the core problems we wanted to solve by introducing the new osquery manager integration for Elastic Agent. Our goal was to simplify a lot of this setup so that you go from something like I just walked through to something more like this, where you can manage all of it with the Elastic Stack. So that includes Elastic Agent for configuring and managing your endpoints, the osquery manager integration, which is what we're focusing on today, which helps you with actually running live queries and scheduling queries. And then the rest of the Elastic Stack for collecting, storing, monitoring, and responding to your osquery data. So all of your setup is within one platform instead of having to connect the dots between a lot of disparate systems. So first, what's Elastic Agent? Elastic Agent is actually pretty new. It was made generally available in a recent release, and it's a single unified agent that you can deploy to hosts or containers to collect data and send it to the Elastic Stack. Once it's deployed, it can collect logs, metrics, security data, and a lot of other types of data from each host. There's only one thing you have to install and configure on those hosts. Once it's set up with pretty minimal configuration, you can deploy integrations across your entire fleet of agents. And osquery Manager is one of those integrations. So what's osquery Manager? So once you add the integration, you get osquery management and execution on your Elastic agents. And within minutes, you can have osquery running across your entire fleet. So you don't have to install anything else or configure your host to start using osquery on these systems. So from within Kibana, you can immediately run live queries against any of those agents and choose whether you want to inspect a single host, all of your hosts, or maybe some custom selection like all of your Windows systems. You can also set up scheduled queries that you want to run on a regular interval and monitor the results. And you can build a library of saved queries, which is great for teams who want to share useful queries that they've built. For example, queries that are tailored to help with threat hunting or incident response. So just a few more things to call out about this. When you're running these queries, all of those results are automatically stored in an index and ready for analysis and monitoring throughout the Elastic Stack. You don't have to take any extra steps to ingest the logs. That means that osquery data is available for detections, machine learning, reporting, dashboards, like whatever your teams need to analyze and visualize that osquery data. So put all together, this integration really simplifies what you need to do to use osquery to monitor your hosts. And it's made it significantly easier to operationalize osquery at scale. And it's also available with our basic license. So we've talked a bit about the functional side of osquery, but how do security teams use it? Well, security teams need a unified solution that helps them to collect data from a wide variety of sources so that they can prevent, detect, and respond to threats. osquery Manager for Elastic Agent is one of the essential tools that Elastic provides as part of our unified security solution. By scheduling queries, you can begin customizing what data you collect from your hosts and provide continuous visibility into your environments. And with live queries, you can directly query hosts during an investigation, for example, when you're responding to an attack. If you've also enabled the endpoint security integration, you'll have the option to isolate hosts from your network so that you can contain an attack and prevent lateral movement to other hosts. But what's super cool is that you can still query isolated hosts with osquery. so that you can continue your investigation while blocking the host access to the rest of your network. So how does it work? I'm going to walk you through a demo, and I just want to show you how easy it is to add the integration to a policy so that you can deploy it to some Elastic agents. Then I'll show you how to run some queries, view those results in Kibana, and then how to load an open source query pack to schedule a set of compliance queries. And then I'll show some example dashboards for monitoring the queries you've scheduled. Just as a side note, before I get started, this demo was recorded on a 714 cluster. So let's jump in. What you should be seeing now is Fleet. So this is something that's available inside Kibana. You can find it down here on the left under the management section. And what this is showing is that in my fleet, I have four agents in the fleet. For each one of those, like these four agents are all in this single policy. It's just a default policy. So if I wanted to use osquery manager on this, how would you do that? First, you open up the policy itself, and then you add osquery manager. You can see here that I've already added a few of these. And the reason that I've done that is because we also currently use this to manage the groups of scheduled queries that you might want to create. And I'll go into a little bit more about that later. So let's start with, how do you add this integration? So I have my default policy. So let's add the integration. Let's come over here, and I'm just going to search for osquery. So I do want to mention something while I'm here, though. So there are two different osquery integrations that are currently available. There's the one that I've been talking about, which is what brings all of that sort of management UI and some of the execution stuff that I'm going to show you here in a minute into Kibana. We also, though, have this integration for just collecting logs. So this is something that you would use if you have your own osquery deployment. And you don't want all of that extra stuff, right? You just want to make sure that you can pipe those logs in. So that's what that one's for. So I'm going to focus, though, on this one. So osquery manager. So once you open that up, it has some docs about it, which I'm not going to go into. And then you add the policy, add the integration. So in this case, I'm just going to name this one demo so we know which one it is. And I can see that I'm adding this to this default policy, which has 4 agents enrolled. And then I save the integration. And what that does is it actually deploys this integration update to all of those agents in the policy. Once you do that, you will then be able to run live queries and schedule queries. I do want to mention that when you do that, you also get access to this navigation item in the management section for going directly to osquery. So when you get here, you have access to all of the past queries that you've run. You can schedule queries, and then you can save queries. So first, let's look at how it works when you want to run a live query. So let's come over here. So first, you need to select your agents. And you have a few options here. You can just select all of the agents that are in your fleet. You can select by platform, by particular policy. For example, if you add this integration to multiple policies, you can choose to just send a query down to a particular policy. But you can also look for individual agents, and you can search by the name or the ID, because some people might have non-unique names for their agents, but that ID is always going to be unique. So in this case, let's just start with a simple query. Let's query all agents. Oops, sorry. So we're querying all agents. First, I just want to write a query and show you how that works. So let's say I want to look for all of the logged in users. So I'm going to say select all from logged in users. And you can see there that I was getting some suggestion text as I was typing. And that's because we actually use the osquery schema to populate this help. I'm just going to hit enter there to autocomplete and then click submit. And when I do that, what that does, it actually sends that request down to all of the agents. And then as soon as those results are available, it starts streaming back to this results table. You can also check the status of those individual requests and see how many result rows came back. So for example, every result is a row. So if there are 5 logged in users in this case, you might see 5 different result rows. So we have a successful status, and then you can see these results. The other thing that we have here is that you can go directly into Discover if you want to inspect those further. So I'm going to open that up over here. And that lets you do whatever you need, right? So this is just taking those, immediately opening it up, and then you can expand that and look at any of these details. The other thing that it provides is a way to quickly get over to our visualization tool, Lens, which I will also open up here. And then you can start building visualizations for the osquery data that you are retrieving. This is just a quick example showing that I have these 3 different platform, or these are actually, looks like these are names, but you can just drag and drop things from over here and start building those visualizations. So let's actually come back over here. I do want to show you the saved queries. So if you don't know like what query you want to write, you can also start from some saved queries. So we don't actually currently ship any of these out of the box, but you can start building your own library based on the things that you know that you're interested in. So just as an example, let's say that you as an organization are interested in all of the Chrome extensions that are installed across your organization. So in this case, just because I know where Chrome is installed, I'm actually just going to select our Mac systems and submit that. And you can see that that query updated when I selected that saved query. Click submit, and the same thing, right? So it actually just sends that request down to that particular agent, and then you can see all of the Chrome extensions that are installed. You can see the version. Another really important thing here is it shows you the permissions, which your InfoSec org may care about. So that's just one very simple example. So let's talk a little bit about scheduling queries. So this is actually really one of the most exciting things that you can do here is that you can start setting up the queries that you want to run on a regular basis. And you can set that interval to whatever makes sense for you and your team. What I want to do is actually start from, and I already have some set up, which we can dig into later, but I want to start with that first one that I added earlier in this demo, because it doesn't have any queries in it yet. But let's add some. So there's a couple different ways that you can do it. So I'm editing that particular integration policy. You can add them one by one here, but you can also just drag and drop in an osquery pack, which is basically here. Let's actually look at what a pack is. So osquery publishes their own packs. And you can see a set of these here. These are really just to help you get started. The one that I'm going to load right now is specifically for IT compliance. There's actually a bunch of people who have published these packs out there publicly. And they're a great way to see like, well, what are people monitoring? And then for you to start building up the queries that you know that you want to run regularly. So this is the IT compliance, which I actually already have downloaded locally, just so I have this file. And so when you want to, oops, let's get back here. So when you actually want to load this and start scheduling those queries, all you do is just drag and drop that file into this area. And then what that does is it actually reads the configuration and loads all of those into the system. And so in this case, you can see it has queries like looking for the kernel info or the OS version. And you can also see that it pulls in the platform information from that query pack to specify, for example, I know that this particular table should only run on Mac systems, so let's not even send that query over to a Linux machine or a Windows machine. And then for any one of these, you can just edit those and change anything that you need for the query. And then once you save this, what this is actually going to do is deploy all of those updates to that policy and then begin that schedule. And so what does that mean? So in this particular case, this is running this is actually about a day. So once a day, it's running this query. And when it does that, it's going to start, you're going to start building up this set of results that you can explore. So I'm actually going to go to a different scheduled query group that I've already had running. Let's go with browser monitoring, actually, so you can see that one. So this is just a set of queries specifically for looking at browser extensions and add-ons, because that's something, because people can load bad ones onto their system, and you want to have a way of being able to collect that information so that you can easily search it and alert on it if there's a problem. So in this case, let's look at this Chrome extensions, the same thing here. So you can view the results in Discover, or you can view the results in Lens. So what I want to show you though is like once you start doing this, you can start building these visualizations, and then you can have these, you can start building dashboards that you and your team can use for monitoring this information. This is just a simple one that we put together that shows the Chrome extensions, some Firefox add-ons, some details about it. And you can start building this understanding of things like this or broader questions. So this is another dashboard that I built for this demo, just showing, for example, the disk encryption status of all of the agents in your fleet, or things like Python packages, because that's also something that you might need to monitor for if there's particular versions that you're concerned about. So that is just my quick demo of what is osquery, what can you do with it. We're super excited about where we're headed with this and all of the things that you will be able to do with it. So just to close this up, basically with osquery Manager, Elastic Agent, and the Elastic Stack, it is now so much easier to get osquery up and running across an enterprise deployment. I definitely recommend that you give it a try. You can test it out for free on cloud. And if you haven't already, I highly recommend joining the Elastic community in our forums or on Slack. We definitely want to hear from you. So if you have any follow-up questions or specific use cases that you're interested in, please reach out. You can find me both in the forum or on Slack. So thank you so much for listening in. I hope you have a good one.